Hello everyone, welcome back to our UiPath for Beginners playlist on KT sessions. Thank you for all the love and support you have shown for this series. In the previous video, we have created our very first project in UiPath and displayed a message box. If you missed it, check it out before watching this one. Today we are diving into one of the most fundamental and essential concept in UiPath, which is variables. We'll explore what variables are, their properties, naming conventions, and best practices. By the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of how to use variables effectively in your automations. So let's start with basics. A variable is like a container that stores data. It allows your automation to store and use information dynamically. For example, you can store a user's name, a file path, or even the result of a calculation in a variable. You can imagine variables as containers that holds data of a certain type. The value of a variable can change during the project's execution, and we can say variables store data dynamically. Okay, so let's go to the studio and create a new project. So for creating a new project, we'll click on process and here we'll give the name of the process or the project. Variables. So there are four methods to create the variables in the studio. So first of all, we can go to this variables tab and here we can create the variable. And also we can go to this data manager and here you can see this plus icon to create a new variable. And apart from these two methods, we can also create a variable directly in the properties pane. Just you need to click on, just you need to press the Control K and it will create a variable for you. Now, let me create one variable in variables pane. Here we can see this create variable option or a button. We can click on this and it will create a variable, and with this the name will be default, which is variable 1, and this will select some default values for variable type, scope, and default. So let's create one variable. So when we go to this variables pane, we can see this option to create variable. When I click on it, it will create one variable for us with the default values. And you can see four properties: name, variable type, scope, and default. So variables in Studio are configured through four main properties, and these are those properties. Name, it is the unique attribute that is used to identify a variable. This is a mandatory field. If you don't add a name to a variable, one is automatically generated. So as you can see, the name is UiPath has automatically generated this name. And as I said, this is a mandatory field, guys. These small details or these little details are really useful, means whether it is a mandatory field or not, because if you are going to attempt any certification of UiPath or if you are going to attend any interview, then they will ask these type of questions, means which all fields are mandatory when we create the variable, or which field is not mandatory. So make a note of all these details. Okay, so this name is a mandatory field and we can give any name here. We'll see the naming convention of the variable. If we talk about naming convention of the variable, the name of the variable should be meaningful and as descriptive as possible, and we should use the Pascal case naming convention. And in this convention, the first letter of each word in a variable is capitalized. For example, if we are giving a name, first name, so it should like this: F is capital and N of the name is capital. Okay. Similarly, we can give last name, first item, last item, key item. And the second property is variable type. Variable type, It defines the kind of data stored in a variable. This is also a mandatory field, and some of the common data type includes string, boolean, int 32, object, data table, array, and when you click on browse, you can find all the data types of .NET framework. For example, I want to create a variable of list type, so I will search for list, and here I can see all the types of list. Apart from these, UiPath also supports data type from imported dependencies as well. And the next property is scope. It defines the context in which a variable can be used in the project. The scope is a mandatory field, and the scope of variables can be set to the current workflow file or any of the container activity within the workflow file. Apart from this, the scope of the variable can also be set to global. Mm, If we set the scope to global, then this variable will become a global variable. And also when we select this variable, you can see in the properties panel, we are seeing the same properties, default, modifiers, name, scope type. And the next property is default value. So if you want to, it is the default value of the variable. This is an optional field. Okay, the name, variable type, and scope are mandatory, but the default value is optional. And if a variable is declared with this field empty, then a default value corresponding to the variable's data type is assigned to it. For example, if we don't give any data type to this variable, and the variable type is int 32, then the default value will become 0, because for integer we have default value 0, and for strings we have default value null. And here you can see the naming conventions for the variables. As I said, use descriptive names, follow camel case, and avoid special characters and spaces. Use only letters, numbers, and underscores, and avoid all the other special characters other than this underscore. And add context when needed. So include prefixes or suffixes for clarity, like string username or int order count. Means if it is an integer variable, you can add a int as a prefix. And if it is a string type of variable, you can add a string for in the prefix. And scope of the variable, you can set this. For example, if we have this main sequence, so let me add one sequence first. Okay, and inside this, we have one more sequence. So let me rename this sequence. You can see parent, child, and main sequence means this whole page, this main .xml file. Okay, so if I want to set the scope till child, so we won't be able to access this variable in this parent. And see, if I select this parent sequence, then that variable is not visible. But when I select this child, it will be visible because the scope is child sequence. So now, for example, if I created a variable and the name of the variable is last name, and let me change the scope to parent. And if I want to assign some value to this last name variable, so I will go to activities and I will search for assign activity. And here we have this assign. So I will drag drop this to my workflow. And here I'll assign a value to this last name variable. Okay. So I want to use this variable name in this save to field. So I'll select this plus icon and use variable. And in variables, we have last name. Okay. And the value which I want to assign this. So I'll give UI path. And then now I want to print the value of this variable. So what I will do is I'll use a message box. And in message box also I'll select the variable last name. Okay, so let me run this. And here we are getting the value of the last name, which is UiPath. And now see, if I select this variable and I change the scope of this variable to child, and if I select this assign activity in the parent, so you can see now we have this assign activity in the parent sequence. So we are getting this error. Last name is not declared. It may be inaccessible due to its protection level. Okay. So we are getting error because the scope of the last name is child. So we can only access this last name variable inside this child sequence. But if we change the scope to parent, then we will be able to access this inside the child, because this child is the part of parent sequence. Okay. We can use the variable inside that scope only. We can't use that variable outside of the scope. So if the scope is child and we try to use that variable outside child, so it will give the error. And if the scope is parent and we try to access that variable inside parent or inside child, it will work, because the child is also a part of parent. Okay, so there are some best practices for using the variables. Always assign a default value to avoid errors, and restrict variable to the smallest possible scope to prevent accidental changes. So if, for example, if I need this variable inside this child sequence, then I will I should give the scope as child, because I'm not going to use this variable outside child. Okay. And if I want to use if I'm going to use this variable in parent also and in child also, so in that case I'll give the scope as parent. Okay, so now we know how to create a variable, and what is the scope of the variable, what is the variable type, and what is the default value. Now we'll going to use the variable. Okay, so now I have this variable first name and the variable type is string. So this means this first name can store the value of type string. String means text. But if I need a variable in which I want to save some digits or numbers, so then I can create a variable or age, and the variable type will be integer, int 32. Okay, and scope, we can define the scope here. Okay, so now let's use this variable. Okay, so I have this sequence. In next video we are going to see this, what is this sequence, flowcharts and state machines. But in this, just we are using this sequence. Okay, so now I have this sequence, and what I want to do is I want to create a I want to assign some value to my variables. For example, I have this variable first name, age. Okay, so first thing, the first way of assigning the value is default value. So for example, if I want to assign some default value, so I can assign the default value here. And also I can go to data manager, and here I will go to variables, and in variables I can see this main means this workflow or this XAML file. Okay, so if there are multiple XAML files, so we will be able to see all the XAML files here. And when we expand this, so here we can see the variables present in this XAML file. Okay, so in main we have two variables, age and first name, and I want to see more details, so I can expand this. I can see data type, scope, default value. Similarly, I can see the data type, scope and default value for first name. And if I click on these three dots, I can see the context menu, and here we can see some more options. So I can copy this variable, I can rename this from here as well. For example, no need to rename. If you don't want to use this variables panel, you can go to this data manager, and from here you can modify the name of the variable. You can delete the variable, and you can add annotations. Annotations means some notes or description of the variable. For example, I'm using this age, so age variable, so I want to describe something. I want to describe the use of this age, so I will give the annotation. I'm using this variable to store the age of employees. Okay, so you can add these type of notes so that it will become easy for the another developers who are going to use this flow or this workflow, and they can see the description or this annotation, and they can understand why we are using this or where we are using this variable. Okay, so we can use annotations, and uh, we can when we click on edit, so we'll get this type of window, and here we can modify all the properties, means name, data type, scope, and default values. It is similar to this variables panel. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to assign some value to my age variable. So there are multiple steps, there are multiple ways to assign the values. For example, if I want to hard code the value, so I will go to the activities, and here I will use this assign activity, which we already used. In the right hand side, we can see the value to save. So what value we want to save? We want to save a value 10. And in which variable I want to save this? I want to save this in my age variable. So I will select the age variable. Okay. So now when we print this, we will when we print the age, so we'll get 10. But see, this 10, this age is a integer type variable, so that means it can store only numbers. Okay, but if if I try to save a string in this age variable, so what will happen is, so let me write some text. For example, I write UiPath. Okay, so this will become a text, and again we will get the error, implicit conversion from string to integer. Okay, so we are trying to convert this string to the integer. Our age is integer, so it is not allowing us to save integer value, save string value in an integer variable. Okay, so if I want to save string value, then we have to use the string variable, which is first name. Now let's see the use of variables. So this is the one way to hard code the value to a variable, or if you want to assign some value to a variable, you can use this assign activity, and you can assign the value. And when we click on this, when we select this assign activity, so here we can see this properties tab. So here also we can see all the properties of this assign. Display name assign, you can change the name, you can make it as private, you can set the value and variable here also. So like when we were creating the variables, I was saying we can create the variable from properties panel as well. So how can we create the variables from the properties panel? Let me show you. Okay, so for example, I have taken this assign activity, and I want to save this value UiPath to a variable. Okay, so what I will do is I will go to properties panel, and here we need to give the variable in which we want to save the value, which is to variable. Okay, so here I want to create a new variable. What I will do is I will press Ctrl plus K, so I will get this type of syntax set variable, and here I need to give the name of the variable. So I will give new variable, or whatever name you want to give, you can give here. Okay, so for example, I'm creating a new variable, so I will give new variable, and I will hit enter. So as soon as I hit enter, you can see a new variable is created successfully. In the variables panel you can see, and here also you can see this new variable. So this is the one of another way to create the variables in UiPath, and same thing you can do here as well. In this, you just press Ctrl plus K and give the name of the variable, whatever name you want to give. For example, old variable, and I will hit enter, and it has created a variable successful. So this is how you can create variables from the properties panel as well. Okay, so now let me show you the another use of these variables. So for example, there are a lot of activities. In all these activities, either we are passing the inputs, or we are getting some output. So for doing this, we are using variables. For storing the inputs, outputs, we are using variables only. So for example, if I use one activity which is input dialog. Okay, so in this, we use this activity to get the input from the user. Okay, so here we need to give the title. Title is Title means that there will be one input dialog. So whatever title you want to give, for example, input box, okay, and input label. So in that pop-up, if you want to give some label, means it will display a message. Enter the name, enter the first name. Okay. So now in this pop-up, what we are doing is we are showing a pop-up and it will ask user to input a name. Okay. And here it is asking, and guys, if you are using a string, you need to give the value in the double quotes only. Okay. Always use double quotes for the string values. And input type, it will be a text box and value entered. So user will enter some value. Okay. So I'm asking what is your name, so they will ask, they will reply, means my name is this. So I want to store the result, whatever they are saying, whatever they are inputting, I want to store that result in a container. Okay. So container means variables. Okay. So I want to save this result in a variable or a container, which is first name or age. So we are asking first name, so we have already a variable first name. And if we don't have a variable, we can you can see it is showing us this uh, suggestion to use the existing variable first name. If I press tab key, so it will use this first name variable. And if it is not showing you the suggestion, you can go to this, you can click on this plus icon, then use variable and select the variable first. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to save this in the first name. Now same thing we can do for age. If we want age also, so I can do that as well. So I need one more input dialog for that. So what I will do is I'll copy this and paste this. So I'll select use variable, and from variables I'll select this age variable. Okay. So our workflow is ready. We are getting two inputs, and we are storing those in variables. Now what I want to do is I want to print the variables. So let's see what values we are getting. Okay. So for printing, I'm using message box. So let me expand this, open in expression editor. Now I want to print a message. Now the message is my name is, and the name we are getting from the variable. So from which variable? The variable is first name. Okay. So my name is first name. Again, I'm using this plus symbol or the plus sign to conjugate this variable name. Okay. My first name is this, and my age is, again we are going to use a variable, so I'll use a plus sign, and here I'll give the variable name, which is age. Okay. Okay. So in this age is a integer type of variable, so we need to convert this into string. So what I will do is I'll convert this to string. I'll click on save and let me run the file. Okay, so here we go. We are getting the first dialog box, enter the first name. So I will add first name robot. Click on OK. And as soon as we click on OK, we'll get the another second pop-up, which is enter the age. So my age is 100 years. Yes, I am 100 years old. See, as soon as we click on OK of the input dialog, we are getting this message box, and in this we can see my name is robot and my age is 100. I'll click on OK. So let me show you. Okay, so this is how we can use variables to make our uh, to store the dynamic values, to change the values. For example, if I run the workflow again, so in this case I can give any other values, so it will show that Daniel and age is 56. Okay, so here we're getting my name is Daniel and my age is 56. So now we are getting the information in the first name and age, so we can use these values for the further processing or whatever we want to do in our workflows. We can use these values and we can perform the another actions. We can apply data manipulation, whatever we want to do. All right, so now see, we are using only two variables, age and first name, but these two variables are unused. So what we can do is we can go to this design, and here you can see remove unused. So when I will click on it, we can see variables. So as soon as I click on it, so you can see, are you sure you want to remove all unused variables? I click on OK. So now when I will go to this, we can see it has removed both the variable, all the variables which we are not using. See, we now we can see only first name and age. So we have this feature to remove all the unused variables, arguments, dependencies, imports. So it is one of the best practice again to remove all the unused data. All right. And also if you want to delete a variable, you can right click on it, and from here also you can delete this. And again, you can go to data manager, and here from here also you can delete. So now what I want to do is I want to make these variables as global. So for that I will go to data manager, and here I click on new variable, and in scope I'll select global. So now it has created one more menu, or for one more category for global. So when we expand global, we can see the variables which have scope global. And if I want to make existing variables as global, so I will go to this age or this, and here I will update the scope to global. Okay. Now first name also, if I go to sequence first name, and here I'll select the scope as global. Now all the three variables are global. So I will click on refresh, and here in variables, now we can't see any variable. So if, because all the variables are global variables, but here we can see only in this variable panel, we can see only local variables. See, if we select sequence, input dialog, we are not getting anything here. So from data manager, we can see all type of variables. And again, when we go to variables, we can see this tab only global. Now we can't see any tab for main or sequence, because we don't have any variable in this main or sequence. We have only three global variables. Okay, so this is how we can create global variables. And for using the global variables, you have to use this namespace. You can see this. And that wraps up our deep dive into variables in UiPath. I hope this video helped you understand how variables work, and how you can use them to make your automation more dynamic and efficient. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more UiPath tutorials. Also, let me know in the comments what topic like to see next. What topic you would like to see next. Thanks for watching and happy automating. See you in the next video.